Hey friends, so for the past, I think I've had a publishing streak on my YouTube channel for almost 3 weeks now, about 18 or 19 days. Every single night in Singapore, I publish a video either at midnight or after midnight. And there was a period of time where I recorded multiple videos at one go, meaning I think I once did 4 or 5 videos at one go, and then I would schedule them for the upcoming days. I've run out of scheduled videos, so now I am recording the video that I'm about to publish. I don't think I'm going to do multiple videos tonight. I did only one yesterday and maybe the day before as well. But it's interesting because I think this may be the first time in a very long time that I have had some kind of regular cadence. And the interesting thing, I guess, is that I haven't actually been recording every single day. It's just that on some days I record more, and then I stagger that and schedule them to look as if I'm publishing every day, as though I'm recording every day. But that's me leveling up my project management, which I have a video about, that I wasn't as able to do before. As I was scrolling, so to decide what video to make today, I was looking at my YouTube channel page. If you haven't seen the channel page itself, you should check it out. I'm quite proud of it because I do it kind of like my Twitter threads. I try to make sure that So I found out that you can only have 10 featured sections on your channel, which means if you're going to put 10 playlists, you can display about 5 or 6 videos per playlist on the screen, and then you can click right or something, so you can get about 12 videos in one playlist on your homepage. So you can have a maximum of about 100 to 120 videos on your YouTube channel homepage. And I noticed that, most of my channels have most of the videos kind of fleshed out. Meaning, if you look at ad libs, I have like over 20 ad libs at this point, and all 12 ad libs are videos that I like. But my memoirs playlist is still currently has about 4 videos, I think, and so I want to add another video to that playlist. That's how I'm currently choosing to make the decision. And I have a list of video ideas. I have a whiteboard outside that I once woke up in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep because I had so many video ideas in my head, and I went to write them all down on my whiteboard, and I've been kind of crossing them out as I do them. It's been pretty satisfying. And one of the things on my memoir list of videos to make about myself is ADHD. Now, I've never actually been diagnosed with ADHD, but I have spoken with some people who have it, some people who are professionals. I have a friend, for example. She's a bit of a therapist. She's like she specializes in working with executives who have ADHD. And when I suggested to her that I might have ADHD, she laughed and she was like, "Of course you have the most," she calls it zesty minds, and she says you're one of the zestiest minds I've ever encountered, meaning I have one of the most obvious cases of ADHD that she's ever encountered as a professional. So I don't have much faith in the mental/psychological space in Singapore, and so I don't really want to go through the process of getting a diagnosis. And I feel like if you understand a disorder well enough, you can probably role play your way into getting a diagnosis, which is slightly Munchausen's anyway. I have ADHD. I think it's very apparent. And I actually made a video about this in 2015, and if you go and scroll through my vlogs, you can see a video that I made about it. That was kind of when I was coming to terms with it in the earlier days, and I hadn't yet really developed mechanisms for dealing with it. I was talking about, I need to do some environmental tweaks, like I talked about the spindle that I used to use where I would, those things where, like, receipts, the little spike that, the little spike that people kind of stab their receipts on. I was using that as a kind of to-do list thing. Like, I would write down my to-dos on post-its, and when it's done, I would stab it, and that was kind of satisfying, like, physically. But that habit didn't stick, and I was saying things like I need to sleep more, exercise more, And those are correct, but those are general principles that apply to everybody. And I think I have had a few more, 5 more years, 5 more years of experience in dealing with it. And I have a bit of a different perspective now. I mean, so all of that is correct, but I guess I have a bigger, broader, wider perspective. Another interesting thing I noticed is that in my earlier videos, I would speak with more of my head voice. I would talk kind of like this and, kind of choked up. And now I speak with more of my chest, and sometimes it gets to a point where it's a little bit forced. But I'm trying to find my balance between my head and my chest, and I do feel like I'm supposed to have a deeper voice than I normally speak. And already there's been this transition. If you're bored enough to go and look through my videos from the earlier days until now, I think you will notice that my voice has been getting deeper. I think I speak somewhat slower in some ways. I enunciate a little differently because now I have a more international audience. I used to speak with my Singaporean friends in mind, and I do have this slightly more Singlish voice and tone that it's all me. I'm not putting on a fake accent. I'm still speaking what feels natural to me, but it does switch a little bit. Anyway, this is a video about ADHD. So every digression I make is a reminder and a reinforcement. But one of the things that was, on retrospect, I'm 30 now. What's crazy is that nobody in school, when I was in school, right, as a student, nobody suggested the possibility that I might have ADHD. None of my teachers suggested it. None of my parents didn't know. I mean, I'm not sure if my parents even know what ADHD is or believe that it's a thing. And but none of my teachers suggested it. In fact, the first person I think who suggested it to me in real life was my boss at my previous company. And when I posted about trying to get things done, I had a blog post that went kind of viral on Hacker News back in 2013, I think. And in the comments, a bunch of people suggested that I might have ADHD. And at the time, I guess I had a mental model of ADHD that is, kind of the fidgety, physically unruly child. And I didn't relate to that caricature that I had in my head of someone who's kind of like running all over the place. Like, I was never that. I can be very ADHD in one place. I can just sit here and have my thoughts. My mind is racing around, and I don't realize that I'm racing around because that's just the way my mind is, right? So I don't feel like I have a disorder. It's just that when I am in society, right, when I'm in school, that I am different than most people. And that's when the differences manifest in a way that causes problems, right? But here's the thing with ADHD, and I also have essays about this with regards to laziness. So I feel that, ironically, the word lazy is the lazy approach to the concept of laziness. And because laziness puts the burden on the individual, you're a lazy person. Whereas I think laziness should be contextualized. It should be defined as work aversion or task aversion. There's something that you are not doing, and the problem isn't with you. The problem is in the relationship between you and the task, or you and the work, right? Because, a lot of the people that I know who struggled with getting things done and who are called lazy, they often have some area of their life in which they are very industrious. And I think, like video games is an example, right? And like very often a child who is described as lazy, you should see his Minecraft buildings, or his World of Warcraft character or whatever. It's just there are areas in which some of us are able to devote tremendous amount of energy and attention and focus, and we build tremendous things. But it doesn't feel like something we can do on command. It doesn't feel like something, it's almost like the attention or the energy has a mind of its own. It has its own logic that the self is not able to regulate, right? And again, regulation is an interesting concept, right? In the past few days, I've gotten kind of while I've been reviewing my notes, I've been made mindful in a sense. I don't know. It's hitting me now. This idea of coercion and how we tend to encounter coercion very early in life. For some of us, it's from our families and our parents. And I think there's always some element of coercion in a parent-child relationship that almost can't be avoided because, the parent is responsible for the child's safety and well-being. They have limited time and energy. They're tired and they need the child to do something. It's not easy. Sometimes you just yell at them or you threaten them or you bribe them or you just try to get them to do what needs to be done. And coercion is kind of the fastest, easiest way to do it. And schools are very coercive environments, if you ask me. And, I made a whole video about school. It's just the structure. You have to go to school. You can't leave. You have to do your homework. You don't have a say in the matter. You don't get to negotiate not doing your homework, right? And there's something about the structure of coercion, the language of coercion, the frame, the context of coercion. It contaminates your thinking. And I was reading my earlier journal entries from 2013 to 2015, and I was struck by how much I was using the language of coercion to try and influence my own behavior. I was trying to take what I learned from my parents and my teachers and people who tried to coerce me into doing things, and I was trying to do that to myself, which is, now that I look at it, it's silly because other people's coercion didn't work on me. So why would my own coercion work on me? Coercion just, historically for me, I know that coercion doesn't work. I end up doing things because I want to do them, because I'm excited, because I'm curious, because I want to know, I want to see, I want to do. And the challenge for me in navigating my life is to allow those forces to lead me to places that I want to go. And yeah, sometimes you have to do things that you don't really want to do. Sometimes you have to file your taxes. Sometimes you have to, there are things that, there's some responsibilities and challenges that you just don't really have much of a choice in. And the best case scenario for me is if I can take the time to persuade myself, almost seduce myself, potentially, however you want to frame it, to convince myself that there's a very important reason for why I should do those things. And it takes more time to explain it, but it's like there's this stubborn child within me that sometimes I call it, a greater wisdom. It's wiser than me. But it's, while it's very powerful, it also has no respect for human constraints and challenges. It doesn't respect other people. It doesn't respect social decorum. It's like, so there's my frontal cortex. I don't want to get into the neuroscience because I don't know the neuroscience specifically. But there's this, there's this conscious mind, the ego mind, whatever you want to call it, the janitor, the manager, the person in charge, and then there's the creative, the muse, the psycho, the possessed, the powerful. And it's a relationship between those two entities, and they may have sub-entities, I don't know. But it's the relationship between the two that is the most important relationship in my life, and I'm guessing in your life potentially, right? Your relationship with yourself. And I feel like the past 10 years of my life or so has largely been about rehabilitating that relationship. I think I have a couple of blog posts about, repairing your internal parent versus child relationship, right? You can't get mad at yourself for not doing what you want. That's a feeling, and you should acknowledge that feeling, and you have to try to have a conversation with yourself. It's hard, and it will feel silly or stupid sometimes. And where does that sense of this is silly, this is stupid come from? It's always inherited from other people, right? Children will talk to themselves all the time and not care. They'll play and they'll imagine things and all that. At some point, we inherit these coercive ideas. Sometimes people talk about this in vaguer terms. They're like, oh, we inherit all these social bullshit ideas. But if you dig into it, what is it really? What is, when we dismiss something as stupid, silly, trivial, pointless, or insert your adjective here, it's usually from a place of coercion where, it's silly as opposed to what? Life is silly in general. Existence is absurd. But when we say that, it's silly of me to have some dumb hobby, why? It's because you have some expectation of yourself that that's not how you should be spending your time. You should is a very dangerous word. You should be spending time working on things that are economically productive. But the crazy thing is, that's not even entirely useful. I often make the case that some of the most economically productive things in the history of humanity have come from people who were following their playful minds screwing around. You know, the most valuable company in the world right now is Apple, I believe. They're like $1 trillion market cap company. And how did Apple start? It started with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And what were they doing? They didn't, wake up one day when they were teenagers or young adults saying, let's start a company, let's start a valuable economic powerhouse. They were screwing around. They would make these things called blue boxes, which were ways of like hacking telephone infrastructure. It doesn't work anymore, but back in the day, it would like spoof the sounds that telephone, computers, whatever those devices used to communicate with one another. And they made with their own hands little blue boxes. They called it blue boxes. I'm not sure if it has a color, but these devices that could hijack telephone infrastructure, that could allow them to make phone calls for free around the world. And it was that experience of leveraging billions of dollars of telephone infrastructure that made Jobs and Wozniak realize that they could be doing that sort of thing. And then they wanted to make more hardware and devices and blah, blah, blah. They were following their curiosity. And the great tragedy of one of the many great tragedies of life is that there are people who don't seem to realize the importance of that process in creating value. If you want to create value, you have to follow, and Steve Jobs says in his commencement speech, he says things like, follow your heart, follow your intuition, you already know. Like, yeah, that's kind of inspirational, borderline babbly stuff. But there is truth to it. And he has discussed it in more useful detail, I believe. He talks about taste. And taste, is you have to cultivate your taste. Taste is aesthetic sensibility. It's a sense of what's good, what's worthwhile, what's potentially interesting. With uncertain variables and unknown, it's knowing what's interesting. And what is interesting, it's what catches your eye, what catches your attention. And what catches your eye and what catches your attention, that requires an independent mind, an independent from your own conscious coercion and repression. It has to arouse something in you. It has to excite something in you. You have to know what it's like to be emotionally excited and aroused at beautiful design or at beautiful text, beautiful poetry, songs, music, movies, whatever. You have to know what you like and you have to know why you like it. And we disincentivize this development. We disincentivize the cultivation of taste, because when you develop taste as a child, it's messy, it's ugly, it's full of mistakes, it looks stupid and silly and wrong. But you have to persist at this process for a long period of time before people start calling you a genius who, just magically seems to know what's good and what's not. I think anybody can do that, but you have to have that faith in that process. Children have taste. They know what they like and what they don't like, until we get inside their heads and tell them, no, stop paying attention to what you like. Pay attention to the class. Pay attention to the whiteboard, to the teacher, right? And that's coercive. It's saying, you don't know what's good for you. You don't know what's interesting. I mean, okay, with the interesting part, it's not, I don't think we teachers and whatever directly tell kids, this is more interesting than that. They just say, stop being distracted by frivolous crap and focus on what's important. And who's to say what's important? That's one of my central bugbears, if you will. I have all these things that I say to play around with the idea of ADHD. Like, who's to say that I have attention deficit? What if I have attention surplus? What if I have, look at me. I have made like hundreds of videos. I mean, in this year, I've made like 60 plus videos of talking about what I think is interesting. Like, there's a lot of attention that goes into that. I have attention surplus. I have more attention than I know what to do with, right? I know. And it's just, when people say ADHD, in my opinion, very often it's kind of a euphemism. What they really mean is, it's like an obedience deficit or compliance deficit. But if they use those phrases explicitly, then they are saying the quiet part out loud, which is that you're supposed to be obedient and you're supposed to be compliant with what other people tell you what to do. And we can't have that. And I have a full spectrum of views on this, and I modify my stance based on who I'm talking to. I do recognize that, and I have been in this position before. There are people for whom they are so bad at having any kind of executive function whatsoever that they can't even take care of themselves. They can't even, I struggle with this sometimes. Like they can't even feed themselves. They can't even go to bed on time. They can't do. And part of that is you fail to listen to your body. Like your body knows what it wants. It knows when it's hungry, it knows when it's thirsty, it knows when it's tired and wants to go to sleep. But if you're used to ignoring your body, then you have this disconnect between your feelings and the requests that your body is sending you, and your head is being this taskmaster that's denying your body's wisdom in a sense, right? Or your body. And I have this whole conversation with Anna and Nibras where I talk about how one of the first things we do in civilized society with children is we potty train them, which is, I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm just saying that we should be mindful about that. What is potty training? It's basically saying you need to do your business on command, right? On schedule. It's not about when you want to do it. It's you have to do it at this time, right? And that don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should be pissing and shitting everywhere we go at any time, right? But it's just telling that one of the first acts of civilization is you have to control yourself, right? And control is a Alan Watts has some nice bits about this, about what is control, what is discipline, what is regulation. It feels to me like there's the chaos, that's the complete absence of it, which is undesirable. It's anarchy. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have tyranny, right? You have this command economy, this kind of Taleb calls it the Soviet Harvard complex. This centralized, top-down, hierarchical. Everything should be done according to what is decreed from the top, right? And like the yin yang aspect, masculine and feminine, and order and chaos, and Apollonian and Dionysian, right? There's that yin yang thing. You need order and chaos. You need day and night. You need inhale and exhale, right? You can't have just one. And for the most part, it feels to me, and again, I'm obviously biased because I'm a bit of a chaotic person. But again, I when I hang out with people who are even more chaotic than me, I play the role of Mr. Order. I play the role of, I have a video about how, and if you want to get anything done substantially, you need to know project management. You need to be systematic. You need to have some structure, but the structure should serve you, not the other way around. It should serve your goals, not the other way around. And school just doesn't have the resources and the context, and at this point the organizational DNA, it just isn't capable of structuring an experience that's catered to the individual child. It's a structure, it's regimentation. You go in, we're gonna put you in a box. We have to, because we don't have the resources to do anything more complex than that. And you suffer for it, and your mind gets boxed up, sometimes permanently for some people. They never get out of it, and they never get out of a way of thinking about things in terms of coercion, right? And so, in some ways, ADHD is the disorder of having an independent, irreverent mind that likes to do what it wants to do, goes hunting and in pursuit of the things that it cares about at the expense of what you tell it to care about. Which, again, I want to clarify, that can be bad. It can be, I think my wife and I once were looking up together, like, people who divorce their spouses because their spouse's ADHD was too bad. Like, that is a phenomenon that happens because, when you get into a relationship, it's no longer all about you, right? The other person has needs as well. They are counting on you as well. It's a partnership, right? And if you can't fulfill your end of the partnership, then the partnership it makes no sense for the partnership to continue. It makes no sense for people to remain in a relationship where the other person just keeps disappointing them, and you could go all the way and say betraying them, or just not holding up their end of the bargain. Like, why should somebody be cleaning up after and picking up after somebody else their whole life? Like, it unless you have some agreement or some arrangement that makes sense to the two of you, right? Life is complicated, relationships are complicated, but just saying that people do get divorced because of ADHD, because of the inability for the person to self-regulate, right? And so for me, I have a lot of skin in this game. I have obsessed about trying to regulate myself in a way that, I hate living with the stress and anxiety of feeling like I'm letting people down. I'm falling behind on my deadlines. I'm breaking promises. When I was a teenager and I had it so bad, I was lying to people all the time. It's a miserable experience. I do not wish it on anybody else. I regret so much about the way I used to act in some ways, but I couldn't do better at the time because I didn't know what I was dealing with. I didn't know what was up, right? And so in closing, I guess I'm going to talk about how I've changed, and so very often when I tweeted about this recently, very often when people ask something like, how do you cope with your ADHD? What they're hoping for is an answer that's something like, how do you live a normal life in spite of your ADHD? And the honest answer is, I don't live a normal life. I have structured my life around, I accept the fact that I have a mind that's freaking chaotic and wild. And so, I don't work in a job that requires me to not slip up. Like, that would screw me. I would die it might be worse. I might cause problems for someone else that could potentially be life threatening, right? Like, I should never be a surgeon or a machine operator, or just anybody whose mistakes would be costly, right? I need to work in a environment where mistakes are cheap, where I can make lots of mistakes. So I make a living selling. So I sell content, right? I sell ebooks. I have a Patreon. I do marketing consulting periodically, which are all things that I am good at, right? And it's kind of safe to make mistakes. Well, with the consulting, there's some risk, but I'm pretty lucky so far in that I choose clients that I have a good feeling about, and so far it's worked out well. And I kind of convey in advance that I am a bit of a risky bet, and if you're really not happy with my consulting, I'm happy to refund you. I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want to make false promises. What else? But I saved up my money for many years when I was working because I wanted freedom. So one of the cool things about ADHD for me is that it lets me be very prolific. I can write a lot. I can make many videos. I can go on for hours and hours and hours. I said in my previous video, I can play a video game for like 20 hours almost straight. Bathroom breaks and then like quick lunch breaks or whatever. But I can do that shit for hours and hours. So from my point of view, even when I was in school, I remember, once a week, we have to wear a tie every Monday for school assembly, and I hated that. And I'm like, you're telling me that if I do really well in school, I have to wear a tie to work? Like, I just symbolically, I didn't like that. And the idea of having to show up to work at a fixed time, the idea of, so all of the best things and the worst things, but especially the best things in my life have come from me being random and chaotic, right? Come from me, even at work, some of my best contributions came from these accidental thoughts and impulses. And so I'm like, I try to make sure that I always have space for that, and I've designed my life to have space for that. And that does mean that throughout my 20s, I didn't make as much money as I probably could have if I were optimizing for my career at the time based on that kind of conventional success model. But what I was doing instead was I was writing a lot, which made me a better writer and a better thinker. And after I left my job, I was tweeting a lot, and that built my audience. And I can tweet all day, man. I might stream someday. No, I don't know if that's. I was gonna say I might stream 24 hours of live tweeting someday, but I don't know. Maybe I'll still do it. I feel like I've kind of crossed a threshold or window where that's not very interesting anymore. But it might be interesting within the context of an experiment. But yeah, so I'm not saying that everybody with ADHD should become a content creator, but you should figure out something that allows you to take your natural inclinations. Like what are you best at? What's naturally something that comes easily for you? For me, it's writing and words, and like when do you feel most at ease? When do you feel like you're like what is it that you do that you look down and you look up and like hours have passed and you still feel pretty good? Like that's the thing that you should try to make into a competitive advantage in some way. And school doesn't train you to do that, and I might talk about that more in separate videos. And I don't think this is more of I guess, this was meant to be a memoir video, right? It's meant to be about me. I might make separate videos in the future about how to deal with these things. One of the things I did that helped me tremendously, and I only started in maybe 2016 or so, is that on my Twitter, for example, I've built these massive webs of threads, so like threads of threads, quote tweets and everything. It's all interlaced and incredibly fractal and rhizomatic, and it's all just connected, tons of connections, like infinite choose your own adventure paths. And that functions for me like a mind palace. If you understand if you know the idea of a mind palace, it's I know, like, I can't remember things very well in terms of like my deadline memory is bad, my schedule memory is bad, but I have very good pattern recognition. I can remember when something is related to something else. And so every time I encounter something that I think is interesting, that I think I might be interested in following up on in the future, I take a note of it, I tweet about it, I connect it to some other tweet that is related. And so I have these like long threads and webs of threads that I can navigate as, it's like an exocortex. It's like a mind outside my mind. It's like, have you seen that GIF from Always Sunny in Philadelphia where this guy is like, he's doing this big conspiracy theory with all the strings and everything? Like, that's what my head is like naturally. And when I learn to kind of bring that outside of my head so that I can navigate it, hopefully one day like Minority Report style, where it's just everything's around me and I can look at it and pull it and play with it, then I'll be even more Visa than I already am. But that's one of the things I do. All in all, I like the way my mind is. All of the pain and stress that I've experienced has been, in my assessment, it's not a consequence of the way my mind is. It's a consequence of the way that my society in Singapore at least, but I'm sure it's fairly international, the way the world is set up is not optimized for creative, irreverent, prolific individuals. And for some of us, our minds only make sense in these contexts, and the context we're exposed to is this classroom, this desk, this book, this tests, right? Whereas for me, my mind makes sense in terms of years worth of work, right? Years of blogging, years of tweeting, years of vlogging. It's when I have this large body of work that things start to make sense, things start to become clear. So it could, so I get DMs from kids with ADHD all the time, or just kids that are not doing well in school. And they're often, I can tell that they're smart. I can tell from the way they're asking me questions and from the things that they're struggling with, that they're very, they're very verbal, they're very kind of developed on some level, but they don't have the ability to kind of repress themselves and regulate themselves harshly as school demands it. And school does demand fairly harsh self-regulation by my standards, because if you have to learn calculus in some period of time, they don't really make, and you have all these other subjects and stuff that you have to learn at the same time, you have a test coming up next week and stuff like that, they don't really give you the time and space you need to really understand what is a derivative and to really understand, slope over run and just dyd. Like, there's a whole history to it. When the people who invented these things, they invented them, it took them years to do it, right? And you can find good explainers on YouTube and stuff, but like, to really understand something really well, you need to be immersed in it for a really long period of time. And I don't think school has enough time to really get you deep, immersive understanding of all of the things that they're trying to teach you. It's just, they just want you to pass tests and do well on the tests, right? And very often, I talk to most people who've been to school, which is most people, which is everyone, right? And most people don't really remember the specifics of what they learned. I did chemistry. I learned about covalent bonds and ions and yeah, I remember some things, hydrocarbons, alkali, compound. Like, I've forgotten this. I know I can look it up again if I have to, but like, I never, you don't go deep enough. It takes time to go deep into things, and it really doesn't make sense the way we educate people, right? And the path that I've taken in this video, if anybody's bored enough to map it out, you can see how the conversation tree goes, and it's divergent, it's branching, it's full of digressions. And this video in of itself, it's me talking for 36 minutes so far. It's not great, right? If you had to grade it as a performance piece or something in school, it's not gonna get a great grade, right? I would give this a C, B minus maybe, right? It's too long, too rambly, you didn't edit it, blah blah blah. But like, I am not grading myself based on this. I'm grading myself based on the process. And when I have made thousands of videos, which I will get to, I bet I'm gonna get to 3,000 videos, right? Then it'll all make sense on retrospect. It'll all add up. It'll all combine. And the things late in the game, they will be so valuable, I believe, that people will be stunned and they'll be like, how did you do that? How did you make something so polished and so substantial and so thoughtful? And I'll be like, I worked on it for a very long time. That's really it. It's how you learn language. It's how you learn music. It's how you learn anything, right? You have to work with the most basic fundamentals and work very hard at it for a very long time. And I don't think the ADHD mind is inherently opposed to that. I have been fiddling with drawing and music for some time. I enjoy it. It's fun. Like, when I get to choose how I'm playing around and how I'm fooling around, like, I get to explore my curiosity. I get to try whatever I think is interesting. And interestingness is just, if you spend all of your time pursuing what is interesting, or most of your time, as much time as you can, you develop a nose for it. And then eventually people are like, how are you so good at saying interesting things? Practice, bitch. It's just, it's funny how, I feel like I have a bit of an ugly duckling kind of story, which is that, I started out as a misfit and I couldn't fit in and I couldn't do what people wanted me to do, and then in the end it turns out now people call me, they compliment me in very grandiose ways sometimes, which is another issue, but which I'll get to in another video. But the point is, I would like to invite people to think bigger and longer. I think one of the benefits of reading a lot as a child was that I at least got exposed to some ideas about the scale and scope of life, right? Which is that you might suck at something now, but do it for 10 years and you will be better at it than everybody else who was better at it than you 6 months in, but who give up within a year. You know what I mean? So you got to pick things for the long term, right? So the ADHD mind is very chaotic, sure, and people feel like they can't control themselves. But part of control, and this is very important, part of control is about framing the workspace, right? So if you can't control yourself in this tiny little environment, try this. Expand your workspace to be larger, and then let yourself be chaotic all over the place. And take notes regularly, right? Take videos, write down what you did, right? One of my pieces of advice is, when you start a work session, write down what you intend to do. And then at the end of the work session, whether it's an hour later or 5 hours later, when you realize that you've deviated tremendously from what you intended to do, that's fine. Don't be mean to yourself. Don't be harsh on yourself. You did something that was different than what you set out to do. That's okay. That's just how your mind is. Write down what you did that was different. Write it down. Repeat this every day or every other day. Whatever. Build a catalog of how your mind travels, right? And over time, you'll see patterns. You'll notice that you consistently drift towards certain things, right? I don't believe anybody who says my mind is completely random. That's bullshit. I've been testing this hypothesis for myself. I've been trying to write 1 million words. I'm about 700,000 words in. I've written about many, many different things, but there are patterns that emerge. You just have to step away from it. You have to look at it from a distance. And then you will see that what you thought was chaotic, what you thought was random, there is actually a greater order to it, but you can't perceive it up close. You can't perceive it day to day. You have to see it from months and from years. And there are things that, I started my writing project in 2012. It's 2020. I still haven't figured out exactly what it's about. There's a bunch of themes that are emerging, but some things just take a really long time, especially very big projects. And I think the ADHD mind is definitely, in my opinion, biased towards big picture things, big ideas, grand, you want to write epics or you want to film, just whatever it is you want to do, it's very big. And big things are made up of little things, but you have to allow yourself to change the scale. Don't let other people's frames contain your imagination, contain your sense of what is possible. Open the window, step outside. That's what Ed Berger says in a video about calculus, right? But yeah. And once you let go of the stress and anxiety you feel about your pattern of behavior being more chaotic and swinging in bigger, wider swings than what is prescribed, the drop in anxiety and stress, you'll see the stress, be gone from your face. Go and if you have ADHD and you're watching this, right, go and watch my older videos from 2015. Look at how stressed my face is. Look at like the muscular tension that I'm carrying with me all the time. My shoulders are all hunched up. And like all that shit that you're not even conscious of, it wears you out, it tires you out, it burns you down, right? It gets you to burn out, right? It just I'm very passionate about this because I struggled in the dark for so long and nobody helped me out. Nobody helped me see what I was going through. And most people who spoke to me like I was an idiot or I was a bad person, a bad child, naughty boy, right? If and when I release my memoirs, of my personal life, I'm gonna title the book Naughty Boy. Yeah, I rambling more than I intended. I was kind of planning this to be a 20-minute video because it's a memoir, but my heart really goes out for people with different minds, because those people do make the beautiful work that the rest of us enjoy. Those crazy minds make Da Vinci had that kind of zesty, chaotic mind, like this hyper-focused, random seeking, multi juggling kind of thing. And I just want to be encouraging and supportive. And I'm not saying you don't have any problems and your problems are not real. Like, I'm sure you have problems. I still have problems. I'm still bad at kind of replying to emails. I'm still bad at doing my accounting, my bills and shit. My wife is pretty good at she's better at it than me. Although I think she has her own kind of ADHD in a way. We're both not neurotypical, and so there are some things that both of us are bad at, and then we're totally screwed. Maybe we need there's this joke that we need a third in the relationship. Nothing sexual, just you decide where we got to go to eat. Just laughing at that. And you don't have to do things alone. That's another thing that school doesn't make you realize, because everything you're doing in school is like standardized tests that's individualized. Like you can, if you're running your own company, you can hire someone who enjoys doing the thing that you hate. There's always someone who enjoys doing the thing that you hate, and you can make friends with them and you can help each other out. I don't know, I do think I would like to make more ADHD content. So if you have any questions for me, I would love to hear them, and I would consider making videos to answer them. That's 45 minutes. I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys for hanging out, and done.